Before she was even born, Kaydence Hazel Mills was in danger. At least, that's what Child Protective Services thought. Her biological father, Robert Mills, had an extensive criminal record and substance use issues. CPS considered him a threat to her and her mother, Sunita DeWita. Kaydence had two older sisters who were already in foster care. Among some news sources, there is a discrepancy on Kaydence's birthday. However, the most commonly repeated date is September 23rd. For simplicity's sake, this will be where we're going to begin our timeline. Kaydence Hazel Mills was born on September 23, 2014 in Queensland, Australia. She was only 5 weeks old when she was put into foster care. All over the world, there are horror stories about foster homes, but Kaydence was lucky. Her foster parents, Nick and Sally Pearson, were loving, attentive, and happy to have her in their lives. Sally's mother called Kaydence her granddaughter and treated her as such. According to Sally, Kaydence was a dancer. She also had fabulous taste in music for a toddler. Her favorite song was C&C Music Factory's "Gonna Make You Sweat, Everybody Dance Now." It didn't matter where she was or what she was doing. If she heard it, she danced. Unlike most young children, Kaydence didn't need to be sweet-talked into eating her vegetables. Broccoli was her favorite food, and she also had a panda bear plushie that she loved very much.
Kaydence was happy living with Sally and Nick, but they were forced to return her to her mother on September 18, 2016. Sally was worried the immediate transition would be hard for Kaydence. She asked Sunita to hold and comfort Kaydence while the Pearsons left. Kaydence followed them to the car, screaming and crying as they left. Sally told Sunita to contact her if she ever needed help, but Sunita never did. Pearsons tried to reach out on Kaydence's birthday, and no one answered the phone. They heard from Sunita much later. All she said to them was, "Kaydence is good." Sally's mother saw Kaydence and Sunita while out shopping. Kaydence was frail, as if she was underfed. She tried to give her foster grandma a hug, but Sunita pulled her back. Sunita did not have good luck with relationships. At best, her romantic partners were incompatible with her. At worst, they were absolutely toxic. But a year before regaining custody of Kaydence, Sunita began dating Tane Desachi. Tane had 11 other children and a documented history of violence in the home. Kaydence and her sisters weren't yet officially in their mother's custody. Sunita agreed to an IPA, an intervention with parental agreement. According to the Queensland Department of Child Safety website, an IPA, I quote, allows child safety officers to work with parents of children and young people while they remain safely in the family home for all or most of the intervention period. They are used when a child or young person's parents are able and willing to work with our department to meet their needs, and that it is likely the parents will be able to meet these needs by the end of the intervention. By November, Sunita regained full custody of her 3 daughters. The Department of Child Safety sent officers to the apartment until December. Sunita and Tane alerted officers that they were moving to Chinchilla. Tane alleged that Robert, Kaydence's biological father, didn't approve of his presence in his ex's and his daughter's life. He was physically assaulted one day, and he believed that Robert was behind it. Rather than alert law enforcement, invest in home security, or be on high alert, Tane decided violence had to be paid with violence. But Robert was out of his reach. So instead, he decided Kaydence would be punished for her father's alleged actions.
Kaydence wasn't properly potty trained and didn't have access to a toddler potty. She was so small that when she tried to use an adult toilet, she often fell in. When she had an accident, Tane beat her with a bamboo stick. She slept naked and alone in a toilet bowl or on the bathroom floor. Tane made her eat her own excrement, and at least once made Sunita do the same. She was denied food and lost weight alarmingly fast. Kaydence's sisters were told not to give her food, comfort, or help her when Tane was punishing her. It isn't reported if he extended this maltreatment to his other stepchildren or if it was exclusive to Kaydence and Sunita. The beatings gave Kaydence severe bruises. She had to wear concealing clothes whenever she left the house so that strangers wouldn't know about Tane's temper behind closed doors. Still, onlookers knew something was wrong. Kaydence was always frail and her hair was shaved off.
While Kaydence was in foster care, Robert was serving a 1-year prison sentence. He and Sunita's relationship was already rocky, and the sentence was the straw that broke the camel's back. When he was released, he worked on bettering himself to get his daughter into his care, but unfortunately, he was not fast enough to help Kaydence. Over the course of 4 years, Robert asked about his daughter. Sunita sent him old pictures and gave him vague answers to his questions or bounced around them completely. Robert made calls to child welfare authorities concerned for Kaydence's well-being. He could not get in contact with his ex or his daughter. They considered him unreliable purely because of his criminal record. In addition, inability to contact a child does not ultimately equal child mistreatment. The department consistently had floods of similar phone calls during custody disputes, most of which were false alarms or non-issues. This was not the case for Robert and Kaydence, however. His instincts were right and should have been taken seriously, criminal record or not. He claimed that child welfare services told him this: once a child is back with their biological parent out of child safety's care, the department's care, we are not bound by any legal law to investigate unless there is significant concerns of harm or danger to the child's well-being. A witness described seeing Tane beat Kaydence on more than one occasion while Sunita watched it happen. Sunita was also known to hit Kaydence with her hand.
One day, this witness saw Kaydence lying on the couch covered in a flower pattern sheet. She was completely still. Her breathing was labored. Kaydence may have been having a seizure caused by an injury to her head. We don't know when Kaydence actually died. Based on the train ticket receipts, investigators estimated that she passed away sometime between February and May of 2017 during one of Tane's beatings with a bamboo stick. While we also don't know the cause of death, the Queensland government's best guess is abdominal trauma or a broken neck. Sunita and Tane swaddled her in garbage bags and shut her in a backyard outhouse. They threw out Kaydence's belongings, buried her in the Chinchilla Weir campground, then went on with their lives. Tane gambled, drank, and shopped as if he didn't kill a little girl. Sunita was visibly pregnant while disposing of her daughter's remains and gave birth a short time later.
For 2 years, the couple lied and collected Kaydence's benefits. Sunita told her family that Kaydence was put back into foster care, but the where and with who changed. Sunita visited Kaydence's grave multiple times, whereas Tane never did. In fall of 2018, Tane dragged Sunita by her hair while she was breastfeeding their child. Emergency services soon responded to a call placed from the couple's home, and child safety officers came knocking on their front door not long after. Sunita lied again. She had a daughter, but she was living with an aunt in Brisbane. Sunita called this person Aunt Jessica, but she didn't give the officers an address or any sort of contact information. If the child safety officers had looked into Kaydence and Aunt Jessica, they would reach a standstill. That's assuming they even investigated at all. Instead, they stopped looking into Kaydence altogether. In 2024, these officers were approached by Australian news outlets. Neither gave any insight into their thought process. In 2019, Sunita was referred by her doctor to the Western Downs Mental Health Service. By this time, she and Tane were split. Sunita told the nurse that she was hiding something. If others found out, she said her children would be put into foster care. The nurse did not get any specifics from her, but Sunita admitted it involved one of her kids and her ex-boyfriend. The nurse passed this along to the relevant authorities. The Department of Child Safety filed the statement as a child concern report. This meant there was enough information to be put on the police's radar, but not enough information for a proper investigation.
Robert was serving a prison sentence when Kaydence was first reported missing. Detectives visited him in jail to rule him out as a suspect. Robert cooperated completely. He turned over his phone and answered every question. This period of time was Robert's personal hell. His daughter's whereabouts were unknown, as well as her safety. In December, Kaydence's oldest sibling spoke to a school guidance counselor. Concerned for the children's well-being, the counselor relayed the information to authorities. It was enough for an investigation to begin in earnest. When investigators began looking for Kaydence, any semblance of relationship between Tane and Sunita broke down for good. They placed blame on each other. At first, it was thought that Kaydence was buried on the property. On December 3, 2019, detectives tore up the ex-couple's backyard but left empty-handed. They took the opportunity to tap Tane's phone. Sunita called Tane later that night. He was recorded saying, and I quote, "I told those motherfuckers that dying little cunt had a fit."
Tane first told police that Kaydence was given to a paternal aunt. Then he said he came home one day from gambling and saw Kaydence lying on the couch, and that Sunita said she hit her head after falling down the stairs. He claimed he told Sunita to take Kaydence to the hospital, but that she wouldn't listen. He didn't end her life, according to him, but he helped Sunita dispose of her corpse. Tane confessed to burying Kaydence in the Chinchilla Weir. For those outside of Australia, Chinchilla Weir is a long-standing recreational spot featuring camping areas, camp kitchen, fire pits, shelters, barbecues, and more. In March of 2020, Kaydence's remains were found. It took 6 months of police investigation to find her. She had a skull fracture so bad that forensic experts compared it to an injury from a bad car crash. Tane and Sunita were arrested. Sunita's other children were swiftly relocated. 4 months later, Sally and Nick Pearson held a memorial for their former foster daughter. They were so heartbroken by Kaydence's passing that they made the difficult decision to quit being foster parents. Their reasoning was based on the fact that they couldn't handle the possibility that something like this could happen again. Nick told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, "You feel bad for walking away, but you think about Kaydence. We're talking about a person, a soul, in the most important years of their life. This is going to happen again unless something changes in child protection."
Kaydence's biological family held a funeral for her in September. They decorated her grave marker with flowers, pink balloons, and a peacock windmill. Robert gave a short speech. He told news outlets, "I took 2 minutes to stand up and talk on her behalf, to be her voice, and make sure she was heard." The people of Queensland turned Kaydence's unmarked grave at the Chinchilla Weir into a shrine. Upset, disturbed, and saddened by her story, complete strangers brought flowers and stuffed animals to the campground.
The couple's trial occurred from July to September of 2024. Tane pled guilty to interfering with a corpse, but maintained that he did not hurt Kaydence. Sunita pled the same. They were tried together, but with different legal teams. Before the trial began, Sunita's legal team requested a screen be placed between her and Tane. Because Tane had a record of DV, this would ensure Sunita's comfort and a smooth trial, but Tane's lawyers objected to this. However, the judge granted the request. The prosecution brought Kaydence's family members to testify about the punishments they witnessed. They said her bruises were almost always in a straight line. They also testified about how Tane made Kaydence consume her own excrement. Tane's lawyers objected to the phone recording being entered as evidence, the one where he called Kaydence a dying little c***. Not only did they say Tane was drunk during the call, but the audio quality was lacking. They claimed their client said lying, but the garble made it sound like dying. Sunita's lawyer said the recording was necessary. Not only did it show inconsistencies in Tane's series of events, but it also clearly demonstrated his hatred for the innocent little girl. The judge allowed the phone call to be admitted as evidence. He listened carefully multiple times and concluded Tane did, in fact, say the word dying. During closing submissions, the prosecution said Blind Freddie would have known, through her suffering and continued maltreatment, she was destined to die. Blind Freddie is a figure of speech, meaning that the most unreliable, incompetent person could look at Kaydence's living situation and recognize she was in danger. The prosecution said that Sunita had other options for Kaydence and actively chose to keep Kaydence in a dangerous environment. It was not logical or reasonable to allow this to go on as long as it did. They characterized the defendants as selfish, dangerous, and unfit to walk among society.
Tane's lawyers took the prosecution's witnesses into question. They outright said that testimonies by Aboriginal witnesses are unreliable by nature because they are more liable to leading questions. These witnesses in particular may have, and I quote, persuaded themselves that something had happened based on the prosecution leading them down a certain path. This is a freaking lawyer saying this. Now, in addition, Tane's defense team said the prosecution could not prove when the extreme skull fracture occurred, before Kaydence's death or after. They also couldn't prove who did it. Tane's defense said it could easily have been Sunita. They said, did Miss DeWita in one of her frustrated and moody states excessively strike Kaydence to the back of her head with either her hand or a weapon? Sunita's lawyer said, the evidence captures that Mr. Desachi displayed 3 emotions toward Kaydence: distance, disgust, and hate through association. Therefore, it was more likely that Tane killed Kaydence. They argued Sunita didn't have the motive to kill her own daughter.
They admitted her parenting methods were excessive, extreme, and depraved, but argued she acted out of fear. She was also a victim of Tane's violence. The prosecution also did not prove beyond reasonable doubt that Sunita had a direct hand in Kaydence's passing. The prosecution convinced the judge that Tane Dasachi intended to cause bodily harm when he beat Kaydence to death. Tane's dislike of Kaydence's biological father was enough to be considered a motive. Tane was asked if he had anything he would like to say. His face was void of emotion. His sentence was 22 years to life. His judgment read as follows. In convicting Dasachi of murder, the court rejected Dasachi's statements that he was not present when Kaydence suffered the injuries which led to her death. The court drew an inference that Dasachi hitting Kaydence on the head and face with the bamboo stick caused her death. In convicting Dasachi of torture, the court found that he intentionally inflicted severe pain or suffering on Kaydence before she died by hitting her on the head and face with the bamboo stick.
45-year-old Tane Dasachi had sat emotionless in the court for most of the trial, but was shocked when his sentence was read out earlier this afternoon. Justice Sean Cooper outlined the confronting final days of 2-year-old Kaydence Mills, who was beaten with a bamboo stick and forced to eat her own waste before her death in 2017. The judge said Dasachi felt anger towards Kaydence's biological father, which influenced his feelings and awful treatment of the toddler. He said, none of that provides any excuse for your horrifying mistreatment and ultimately your killing of a vulnerable child in your care. That appalling conduct must be denounced. The court also heard Dasachi and Kaydence's mother Sunita Dewita lied together and told everyone Kaydence had gone to live with her aunt, when the awful truth was they buried her body in garbage bags at the Chinchilla Weir during a family camping trip 5 years ago. Dasachi was sentenced to life in prison, but with time already served, he'll be eligible for parole in March 2042. Sunita Dewita was acquitted of murder on Tuesday, but was sentenced to 2 counts of interfering with a corpse.
Sunita Dewita was acquitted of murder charges. Instead, she upheld her original guilty plea, 2 counts of interfering with her daughter's corpse. The judge decided that there was not enough evidence to prove Sunita agreed to mistreat her daughter without threat to herself. She was given an 18-month sentence with time served already. Robert believes his daughter would still be alive if she was white or white passing. He told news outlets the following. They don't listen if a parent's got a bad record. If they make a complaint about the other parent, they just discard it because he's jealous or whatever. Drugs, what history they've got, they discriminate, and now look. A little girl's dead. I think it was swept under the carpet because she's of indigenous descent. Robert's words have merit behind them. Australia, just like the US and Canada, is no stranger to discrimination against its indigenous population. Child welfare has a long, turbulent history with indigenous families. Early forms of child protection allowed for the culling of Aboriginal culture under the guise of rescuing children. In truth, much like we've seen in Canada with the 60s sweep, and we talked about this during our coverage of the Phoenix Sinclair case, Aboriginal children were forcibly snatched from their families with little to no warning. The children were told that Aboriginal people were inherently lesser than human, and that they would stay that way unless they conformed to Western customs. This practice continued until the 1970s. The children taken are collectively called the stolen generations, and there are over 15,000 survivors of the system still alive today. The result is generational disconnect and trauma among these survivors. The child welfare system has gone through many changes throughout the last 2 centuries, but clearly it has not been enough.
In speaking about Kaydence, Australian Child Welfare said their protocol was ignored. A spokeswoman said there were laws in place that barred official comments on individual child cases. All she could say about Kaydence was, "The safety and well-being of all Queensland children is a top priority, and we are continually working to ensure the state's child protection system is as strong as it can be."
The Australian Broadcasting Corporation interviewed Vish Chandani, a former child safety officer. He was not the one assigned to Kaydence's case, but he worked in the same office space with those who did. He gave his insider knowledge on the relevant procedures that were completely ignored. Protocol was there for a reason. It's a delicate and important process to ensure the well-being of a child. Skipping one step could have horrifying consequences. If a child is not in the home during a visit, it's the safety officer's duty to find the child. If they can't, they need to make a report to the police. Mr. Chandani called this the bare minimum. He said there were individual issues with the child safety officers assigned to Kaydence's case, but that the failure was with the system, namely high employee turnover rates, heavy workloads, inexperience, and department secrecy. He compared Kaydence's murder to another child's death. In 2016, 21-month-old Mason Jet Li died at the hands of his mother's boyfriend. News coverage spurred a response by the Australian government to fix the prominent issues in the Department of Child Safety. Evidently, these changes were not enough, and Kaydence slipped through the cracks. In more recent times, Mr. Chandani asks for a fresh inquiry into the child protection system in not just Queensland, but Australia entirely. As the saying goes, the call is coming from inside the house. Till these mistakes are addressed and amended, none of Australia's children are safe. Since Kaydence's passing, the Australian government invested 2.3 billion Australian dollars into child and family welfare. In 2020, Queensland formed the Child Death Review Board. According to their website, their duty is to investigate the deaths of children connected to the Department of Child Safety. This is a quote from the Queensland Family and Child Commission's website. These reviews identify opportunities to improve the child protection system and prevent future deaths. The board uses agency information, research, and data to make system-wide findings and recommendations for systemic improvements to help prevent deaths that may have been avoidable. Unlike the previous child death case review panel, the Child Death Review Board is an independent entity. And I quote the Queensland Family and Child Commission again. The board is not subject to direction by the responsible minister or anyone else about how it performs its functions. The board is established to act independently and in the public interest at all times. With the funds they acquired, Queensland's Department of Child Safety could raise the starting salary for new applicants, which led to an increase of applicants for empty positions. There's still a long way to go, but it's a start. Only time will tell how meaningful these changes will be.
Sunita was officially acquitted of murder charges on September 17, 2024. Her release was delayed so she could make living arrangements. She left prison 6 days later, on the 23rd, the day of Kaydence's 10th birthday.